The sun was dipping low over the rooftops of Harborview, casting long, honey-colored shadows across the boardwalk outside Andrew Carter's bookstore. Inside, Andrew sat at the worn oak counter, carefully tallying receipts from a slow Tuesday. The scent of old pages and sea salt lingered in the air, comforting and familiar. His phone buzzed once, an innocuous vibration. Without thinking, Andrew picked it up, expecting maybe a supplier update or a note from a regular customer. Instead, the screen displayed a message that cleaved his life in two. Andrew, I want a divorce. Please direct all future communication through my lawyer, Mr. Jennings. His details will follow. No explanation, no warning. 15 years of marriage dissolved into 3 detached sentences. Andrew stared at the text, the numbers on his spreadsheet swimming into nothingness. For a moment, he felt suspended between two realities. The one where they had shared coffee just that morning, talking about repainting the living room, and the one now, where Claire had severed the life they'd built with the clinical precision of a scalpel. He sat motionless, the slow burn of betrayal clawing up from his gut. Hurt, shock, anger. They brewed under his skin, each emotion jostling for space, but overriding them all was a strange, icy clarity. She wanted formal, she wanted distant, fine. He could be formal and distant. Thumbs trembling slightly, he typed a single word back. Understood. Then he put the phone down, his mind already moving forward. Not out of vengeance, but survival. She had declared war. Now he would play by her rules. First step, financials. Andrew and Claire had always maintained largely separate finances, an early lesson learned from watching their own parents' messy divorces. Yet over the years, Claire had gained access to several of his accounts through supplementary credit cards and shared subscriptions. Methodically, Andrew opened his banking app. He found the list of authorized users and one by one revoked Claire's access. Supplementary cards? Canceled. Recurring monthly transfer to her personal account for discretionary spending? Stopped. Streaming accounts, cloud storage, anything tied to his name. Logged out, passwords changed. Claire would now have exactly what she asked for. A clean, formal separation. The car she drove, technically leased under Andrew's name, was a complication. He flagged it for immediate review with his future attorney. No rash moves yet. It wasn't safe to cancel insurance without exposing himself to liability, but that loose end would be tied off soon enough. Each action, each click, felt surgical, emotionless. It took less than 30 minutes to unwind 15 years of casual trust. When he finished, Andrew sat back in the creaky stool behind the counter, staring blankly at the closed laptop. The store felt different now, thinner somehow, as if the walls knew something fundamental had shifted. An hour later, Claire's lawyer details came through. Mr. Jennings, one of the larger law firms out of Bay City, polished, expensive. Andrew didn't hesitate. He emailed Ms. Grant, a divorce attorney recommended by one of his former college friends, a woman known for being quiet, lethal, and absolutely meticulous. Claire has initiated divorce proceedings, he wrote simply. Text attached. I need counsel on asset protection and next steps. Within 10 minutes, her assistant replied, Initial consultation scheduled for tomorrow morning. Bring documentation. Andrew closed the shop early that night. When he arrived home, the small coastal house they had shared for 12 years felt like a stranger. Some drawers were emptied, a few photos missing from the hallway, her side of the closet gutted. He stood in the middle of the living room, keys still dangling from his fingers, realizing that Claire had already packed while he was sorting through invoices and paperbacks. It was surgical, too, just like her text. He slept that night surprisingly well, exhaustion blanketing him heavier than grief. 3 days passed. On Friday afternoon, as Andrew was unpacking a shipment of new releases, his phone rang. Unknown number. A part of him already knew. He answered. Mr. Carter! A clipped, impatient voice. This is Mr. Jennings, counsel for Claire Davis. Andrew tucked the phone between his ear and shoulder, continuing to slice open boxes. Speaking. My client is experiencing some difficulties, Jennings said, the pause sharp enough to cut glass. Her credit cards are declining. She has no access to funds. This is highly irregular. Financial status quo must be maintained during separation. Andrew laid down the box cutter, his movements slow and deliberate. With respect, he said calmly, Claire informed me on Tuesday that she wished to dissolve our marriage and directed all future communication through you. I have complied fully. Informally, financial support has ceased. Formal agreements will be handled legally. A rustle of papers on the other end. Jennings cleared his throat. She requires immediate financial support for necessities, housing, food. Andrew cut him off, his tone cool. Where is she staying? That is not pertinent, Jennings snapped. Andrew let that hang between them for a long moment before replying. My wife unilaterally ended our marriage via text. She set the terms. Communication through lawyers. The financial trust that existed between us ended the moment she did that. The support discussions will proceed formally through my counsel, Ms. Grant, whose information you have. Another pause. You acted in bad faith, Jennings said stiffly. No, Andrew said, voice calm as water. I acted exactly according to her wishes. And without waiting for a response, he hung up. His heart was pounding, adrenaline flooding his limbs. But beneath that tremor of fear was something steadier. Validation. Claire wanted cold. She was getting cold. Exactly what she asked for. That night, Andrew sat by the window of his nearly empty house listening to the distant crash of waves. For the first time in a long time, he felt the stirrings of something unfamiliar. Not anger, not despair. Resolve. Claire had chosen to torch their life without so much as a conversation. She had tried to force his hand while shielding herself behind expensive lawyers and carefully crafted victimhood. But she had underestimated one thing. Andrew Carter had built his bookstore from a leaking basement and broken dreams. He had rebuilt before. He knew how to survive storms. And this time, he wasn't just surviving. He was taking back control. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. But tonight, he allowed himself the quiet, simmering certainty that he was no longer playing by her rules. Not anymore. Not ever again. The day Andrew sat across from Mrs. Grant in her narrow-paneled office, the air smelled faintly of lemon polish and ink. Outside the window, gulls screamed against the gray sky. Inside, the storm was just beginning to build. Ms. Grant flipped again through the stack of documents Andrew had brought. The printed text messages, the frozen account notices, the financial records. She moved with a precision that unnerved him, not because it was cold, but because it was clean, efficient, ruthless. You did exactly what you needed to do, she said at last, tapping the folder closed with a soft click. Now we hold. Andrew nodded, though his stomach churned. He had always thought of battles as loud, explosive things. He hadn't realized that the real wars were fought silently, on paper, in waiting rooms, in the spaces between words. The first real strike came that Monday. Mr. Jennings, Claire's attorney, filed a petition demanding emergency spousal support and exclusive use of the house Claire had already abandoned. The numbers were obscene, amounts that bore no resemblance to the reality of their modest life by the harbor. Claire, it seemed, wanted not just stability, but the full reproduction of a lifestyle she had already chosen to leave. Andrew read the petition in the bookstore's back room, the smell of fresh ink and cardboard wrapping around him. For a moment, rage prickled at the back of his throat. Then he exhaled slowly, letting it drain out through his fingertips. Ms. Grant responded within hours, countering with a practical figure based on Claire's actual needs, not her imagined entitlements. They moved through the motions like seasoned fencers, thrust, parry, counter, never raising their voices, never breaking form. But it wasn't long before Claire shifted tactics. That Wednesday night, Andrew's phone rang, slicing through the calm he had tried to build. Leah Brooks's name flashed on the screen, Claire's oldest friend, the one who had always lingered too long at their parties and laughed too loud at Andrew's expense. He should have ignored it. Instead, he answered. "What the hell, Andrew?" Leah's voice spat through the speaker before he could say a word. He closed his eyes, grounding himself against the tide. "She's sleeping on my couch," Leah continued. "You left her with nothing. She can't even buy groceries." Andrew kept his voice level. "She chose this. She demanded lawyers-only communication. I'm honoring that." "She barely works!" Leah shrieked. "How's she supposed to survive?" There it was. The guilt, wrapped in anger, tossed at his feet like a challenge. Andrew inhaled slowly through his nose. "She had choices," he said, his tone flat as steel. "She made them without me." Leah's voice dropped to a hiss. "She's going to take you for everything." Andrew didn't react. He didn't flinch. He just ended the call and sat there in the half-dark, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. The manipulation was so familiar it almost made him laugh. Almost. He logged the call in a notebook Ms. Grant had given him, careful handwriting recording every insult and every threat. By the next morning, Claire made her next move. A bank notification jolted him awake. Suspicious activity on an old joint savings account they'd all but forgotten. Andrew drove straight to the bank, cold fury stiffening his shoulders. He explained the situation crisply to the branch manager, who froze the account without hesitation. It wasn't about the money. There were only a few $100s left. It was about what it meant. Claire wasn't willing to wait for the process she had demanded. She was trying to backdoor her way to what she thought she deserved. When Andrew told Ms. Grant, she only smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "She's undermining her own credibility," she said, "and she doesn't even see it." The emergency support hearing arrived on a damp Thursday morning. Claire was already seated when Andrew entered the courtroom, wearing a dress he didn't recognize, and makeup that shimmered with carefully curated distress. She didn't look at him. Mr. Jennings painted the expected picture: abandoned wife, devastated finances, heartless husband. He spoke of injustice, of hardship, of betrayal. Miss Grant stood when it was their turn. No theatrics, no raised voice, just facts. Claire had ended the marriage. Claire had demanded communication only through lawyers. Andrew's actions, canceling cards, ending informal support, occurred only after that text, and he had continued covering the major expenses, like the mortgage and insurance. Claire's part-time income, meager but existent, told a different story than the one Jennings spun. The judge listened in silence, his expression unreadable. Then, almost casually, he asked Claire why she hadn't discussed support arrangements before initiating legal action. Claire stammered something about fear, about feeling trapped, but the judge's gaze remained steady, unimpressed. In the end, Claire was awarded a fraction of what she asked for. Enough for basic needs, nothing more. No luxurious lifestyle, no endless safety net, only what was fair. Andrew left the courthouse lighter, his steps quicker. But he knew it wasn't over. It never was. Claire's next attack came quietly, like rot behind drywall. An anonymous complaint landed at the local business council, accusing Andrew of misusing bookstore funds to finance his personal and legal battles, hinting at emotional instability and erratic behavior. Andrew's hands shook briefly when he first read it, not because he feared the accusations, but because he recognized the signature behind them even without a name. He scheduled a meeting immediately, bringing clean ledgers, expense reports, employee testimonials. The board listened, reviewed, and dismissed the complaint without ceremony. But Andrew logged that too in his notebook. Another strike, another pattern. Then came the late-night calls from Claire's mother, voice dripping with grief and recrimination. "How could you do this to her?" she sobbed. "After everything she sacrificed for you?" Andrew said nothing about Claire's secret savings, her hidden assets, her lies. He simply repeated the same phrase, over and over like a shield. Claire demanded legal communication. Please direct all inquiries to her lawyer. Click. Another call logged. Another boundary held. By the end of the month, Andrew realized that defense wasn't enough. It was time to press forward. Ms. Grant filed motions forcing Claire to disclose her complete financial history, including family gifts and inheritance she had once claimed didn't exist. The car lease, still in Andrew's name, became another front. Claire would either take over the payments or return it. No more blurred lines, no more silent debts. The clarity was brutal, but it was necessary. At night, Andrew still sat by the upstairs window of his empty house, the bookstore dark below him. Some nights he stared into the fog rolling off the harbor, wondering how it had come to this. Other nights he simply wrote. Every call, every lie, every manipulation, not because he hated Claire, because he would not allow himself to forget again. Claire had expected chaos, expected him to unravel. Instead, she found something harder to break than anger. Silence. Cold, deliberate silence, edged with resolve. Andrew Carter wasn't fighting to win back a marriage. He wasn't even fighting to win. He was fighting to reclaim himself. And somewhere deep down, he knew. This war, however long it lasted, would end the way it should, with truth standing when all the lies had finally collapsed into dust. The months that followed felt less like chapters of a story and more like trenches dug in hard, frozen earth. Every motion, every hearing, every piece of paperwork scraped another layer of patience from Andrew Carter's soul. By the end of summer, Claire's tactics had shifted from desperation to stubborn defiance. She refused to return the leased car, claiming necessity, but when pressed, couldn't qualify to take over the payments herself. The deadlines passed, the reminders stacked up, and finally Andrew notified the leasing company. One cool September afternoon, the car was quietly repossessed from the curb outside Leah Brooks's townhouse, where Claire had been crashing for weeks. The furious texts came within hours, not from Claire directly, but from the usual chorus. Leah, Claire's mother, even distant cousins Andrew barely remembered. Each message was a bullet aimed at guilt, painting him as heartless, cruel, vindictive. Andrew didn't answer any of them. He simply screenshotted each one, emailed them to Ms. Grant, and went back to restocking the shelves of his bookstore. He had learned that not every accusation demanded a defense. Some storms had to be weathered in silence. The battle over the house grew uglier. Claire's legal team pushed for an uneven split of the proceeds, claiming economic disadvantage. Ms. Grant countered sharply, citing Claire's voluntary departure, her refusal to assume any responsibilities, and, most damning of all, her hidden assets. The discovery process had uncovered savings Claire had quietly stockpiled, contributions from her parents, a small inheritance she had commingled with marital funds, stocks she had conveniently forgotten during early disclosures. It wasn't millions, but it was enough to dismantle the image of the helpless abandoned spouse she had tried so hard to craft. The judge was not amused. In pretrial conferences, his irritation with Claire's stalling tactics became evident. Deadlines were missed, excuses piled up, and through it all, Andrew showed up, on time, prepared, silent. There was no dramatic showdown, no shouting match in the courtroom. In the end, it crumbled the way exhausted things often do. Claire caved. Just weeks before the full trial was set to begin, her attorney approached Ms. Grant with an offer. The settlement wasn't perfect. No settlement ever is. Andrew would receive slightly more than half of the house equity, factoring in Claire's hidden assets. The inherited stocks were ruled as marital property due to their commingling and divided accordingly. Claire kept a modest personal savings account, small enough that Andrew didn't bother contesting it. Spousal support was granted, but limited to 2 years, at a reasonable amount contingent on Claire actively seeking full-time employment. No extended lifestyle maintenance, no blank check. Each party would pay their own legal fees. It wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about closing a door that needed to be closed. The final papers were signed in late November, on a gray afternoon that smelled of rain and burning leaves. Andrew sat alone in the bookstore's tiny upstairs office afterward, the signed decree heavy in his hands. It didn't feel like victory. It didn't even feel like relief. It felt hollow. But hollow, he realized, was better than haunted. He stood up, stretched his aching back, and made himself a cup of coffee. No grand celebrations, no victory laps. Just quiet. Just the knowledge that he had survived something designed to break him, and that he had done it without becoming someone he hated. News traveled fast in Harborview, faster than the tides. Word of Claire's situation, small apartment, increased work hours, persistent financial complaints, filtered through the town's whisper networks. Andrew heard bits and pieces through customers, neighbors, even old friends who still wandered into the bookstore from time to time. He didn't gloat. He didn't grin at the rumors of her troubles. He simply nodded, thanked them for their business, and went back to dusting shelves or repairing battered first editions. The bookstore was quieter these days, but it felt more alive somehow. Every repaired chair, every new display felt like another stone laid in the foundation of a life he was rebuilding from the ruins. Sometimes, late at night, Andrew would sit by the upstairs window and wonder if Claire ever regretted how it all unfolded. If she lay awake, replaying the choices that led them here, the text message, the lawyer's only demand, the silent expectation that he would carry her through the destruction she had orchestrated. But he never dwelled on it long. Regret, he had learned, was only useful if it sharpened you towards something better. 6 months after it all began, Andrew stood behind the counter of the bookstore, watching as the early spring sunlight crept across the hardwood floors. A young couple wandered in hand, arguing playfully over which novel to buy. An old man in a battered fisherman's coat browsed the nonfiction section. The air smelled of fresh coffee from the corner cafe and salt from the harbor. Life had gone on, not because it forgot, but because it refused to stop moving. Andrew smiled faintly and reached for a stack of newly delivered books, feeling the smoothness of the covers under his fingers. He thought about everything he had lost. A marriage, a version of his life he had once thought unshakable. And then he thought about what he had found. Peace, clarity, the ability to trust himself again. In the end, Claire hadn't destroyed him. She had simply forced him to choose what he valued most. And he had chosen wisely. Not rage, not revenge, not even restitution. Freedom. Freedom paid for with months of exhaustion, thousands of dollars in legal fees, Endless battles fought both in courtrooms and inside his own heart, but it was his. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Andrew Carter breathed in the ocean air, let it fill his lungs, and thought, better to lose a battle than lose yourself.